Hello, everybody, and welcome to our security lunch and learn. Thanks so much for joining us. We're just going to wait another maybe minute to see who else pops into the meeting with their lunch. Hopefully not too long. Today we have Liam presenting on security frameworks. He's going to make it so the rest of us new mortals can understand. Supported by Chris, who does a lot of our alignment audits for the virtual IT department. So he's a great resource in that space too. So without further ado, over to you, Liam, to take us on a journey. We'll have some questions at the end, as we normally do. So if any come up during the process, feel free to pop them in the question and answer section of the webinar, and we'll be able to get to those after the end. Otherwise, we have some we prepared earlier. So we will, look forward to answering those questions. Thanks, Liam.
Thanks, Anna, and hello all. So about 6 years ago, a good friend of mine asked if I could help them do an ISO 27001 gap analysis for their software development business. And at that time, I had no idea what ISO 27001 was. And to be honest, it all just sounded like bureaucracy. So we did that, and we've muddled our way through. A couple of years later, another friend asked me to help me get their software development business accredited against the 27001 ISO series. And with a little help from a top bloke named Neil Campbell, we got there in just under 7 months, which I learned afterwards was something of a miracle, and we had no idea because we were just working our way through it. Off the back of that accreditation, their business suddenly was eligible for a whole bunch of new work and opportunities, and so it was a really great boon for them. So this cycle continued on for a little while for me, with people saying, hey, can you help me with this? And, feeling ever more confident, having, not fallen off the bike the first time kind of thing. You keep plowing on. And then another gentleman by the name of Matt Lee challenged me a couple of years ago now to fit my own face mask before helping others, using the flying analogy. And that really hit home to say, well, it's great that you can talk about this stuff and you're helping other organizations, but what are you doing at home? What are you doing in the virtual IT department? And so we took that challenge to say, okay, well, we've got to be making sure that we are running harder and going further than those that we're trying to support, so that we're living and breathing, or as Anna likes to say, drinking our own champagne, the security and the frameworks that we're all believing in. So you all already know my name is Liam Furlong. Anna introduced me, and with Anna, we own the virtual IT department, and among other things, help other organizations to develop security policies and controls and serve their business and staff and keep their data safe. So with these lunch and learns, I've been fortunate enough to do a couple. I like to keep it hands-on and practical, but this one is going to be a little bit more show and tell than click and explore. So I hope that that's okay for everyone, because there's not a lot of clicking around in a security framework. It's discussing. So today we want to answer these 4 questions, which is, what is an information security framework? Is that a policy or a control? That's your problem, right? And how do we choose the right one? So these are the things that I most commonly get a question about, and I figure that's going to be an easy place for us to start. So a framework or a security framework is the same as any other framework, which is it's a recipe. It's a list of ingredients and a process to get a specific result. An InfoSec framework is a recipe for information security outcomes. So commonly in small business or in medium business, we would be familiar with some frameworks like a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. And we can apply that in a bunch of different ways. You don't have to do it strengths, weakness, opportunity, threat. You can bounce it around. You can, apply other extended analysis to it. But this core concept of these 4 elements is the framework. The 4 Ps of marketing would be another one that I think a lot of people would be familiar with: product, price, promotion, and place. So why do we use these frameworks? And why in particular do we want to look at information security frameworks? Frameworks are really good for starting something that you haven't done before or you don't do often. A framework is also really good to help us not forget that really important step that we might often forget or might otherwise forget. Frameworks help to drive objectivity in outcomes. And a framework never perfectly matches your situation and your people. So For example, you don't have to do that SWOT analysis in a particular order, but you do have to do it in a way that engages and energizes your team. And you do need to take care of all of the steps on the way through. So some frameworks that people will have heard about or might be familiar with. Just starting at the top left there, we've got Right Fit for Risk, which is an Australian specific one for those dealing with government data and government grants particularly. The PCI DSS compliant, if you're dealing with credit card data, you're almost certainly familiar with PCI. The Centre for Internet Security is a little known organisation in SMEs in Australia, but this is an independent organisation. So where the Essential 8 that we see in the bottom right-hand side is really developed by the Australian government, and NIST is really heavily driven by the needs of the US government. The Centre for Internet Security's framework is not driven by any particular government need. It's driven by what is considered good practice in industry. SOC 2 is another one that people see a lot, and we get a lot of people saying, do I need to get SOC 2? And almost always the answer is no, especially if you think the audit for ISO 27001 is substantial, then SOC is next level. The GDPR over in the EU, we see the GDPR requirements. GDPR really did get the ball rolling. What the EU developed around, we need to have something. Some would say perhaps they went a little bit far, but I would say everyone else is kind of playing catch up, and they're pushing, continuing to push us forwards and challenge the way we think about data. The GDPR was really the first security framework to make the comment or the statement that we should be treating people's data with as much care and concern as we would treat someone's credit card number. And I find that picture or that mental assessment to be a really helpful and healthy one. I've already mentioned NIST and the Essential 8, so I'll keep going. So what goes into a framework? There are 5 common elements in all of these frameworks. We see policies, controls, a structure of some kind, some guidance or good practices, and this idea of continuous improvement. So the last 3 points make pretty good sense. We don't get a lot of questions about that commonly, that there is a structure, that there is good practice, and that you need to do better and better over time. Policies and controls is worth talking a little bit more about. So the difference is a policy is a high-level statement outlining your desired behaviour or your organisation's desired behaviour and your commitment to information security. They set the what and the why. They often lack specific details on how things should be done, which is where a control comes in. A control is a specific action or a process or a mechanism implemented to achieve the objectives outlined in the policies. They provide the how by defining concrete steps or preferably technical boundaries. So you can see in our map, we know where we want to go and we've got a rough idea of how we want to get there, but a train or a tram is stuck on its tracks. It has to go a particular way and it is really driven. And it's a good picture between the idea of your policy and your control. So controls are the implementation of policies would be another way to look at it or to think about it. Policies provide the foundation for controls. If you get stuck into developing your controls, but you haven't done any of your policy work, you're going to find yourself creating weird and wonderful controls, missing things or going too far in other areas, which again is the value of frameworks. So some good examples might be, and I'll lift some examples from ISO 27001, which I didn't include on the previous couple of slides, but that's okay. ISO 27001 has a section A.8.24, and it's the use of cryptography. So the policy would be all communications concerning sensitive data should be encrypted, which is a great policy to have for your organization. The control would be every device is programmed to be encrypted, and devices that are not encrypted flag automatically, and a conditional access policy blocks them from having access to your SharePoint environment. So you've got a policy that says, we protect this kind of data by encrypting the way we communicate with it. And that's a nice idea, but if you haven't got a way of forcing that to happen, it remains a nice idea, or you rely on the humans to remember to do it or to know how to do it. So the control drives that through and sees your policy brought to ground. Some other examples would be A6.3 is around information security awareness. So the policy might be, all staff should participate in an InfoSec awareness training. And most people would have a policy about this somewhere in their HR or in their insurance requirements would say, oh yeah, we tick the box. All of our staff do security training every year. That policy is a good one. The control could be the organisation provides training, but how do you measure the extent to which the staff person internalises that training or actually acts based on the training? So here you have a real tension point between what your policy says and what your controls can actually do in terms of underpinning that particular policy. Or another similar example would be confidentiality agreements should be in place to protect private data or to protect IP, intellectual property, which is good. And so the control is we have agreements that have NDAs written into them. And we even check our agreements to make sure that buyer-seller relationships where an agreement with an NDA should exist has that piece in place. Again, this is really good. But how do you stop someone from saying something they shouldn't say? And so we have to have this partnership now between what you've got in your policy and in your control, and then working with your staff to actually educate them and also make sure that they understand the importance of what they're doing. And so we see this final piece emerge called culture, and it wraps the whole thing in. Now, culture is not a part of any framework, but a lot of the frameworks will talk to how you measure culture. And again, using ISO 27001, the very first requirements in that talk about strong leadership and demonstrated leadership. If the boss can do whatever they want and expects the staff to do something else, you can guarantee when no one's looking, the staff will do whatever they want as well. So you need to see it led really well. So at this point, possibly your head might be swimming a little bit. There's quite a bit going on. I've hopefully not used too many acronyms, but I'm pointing to a number of complexities and overlapping elements. And usually at this point, we find people who are asking the question of InfoSec and frameworks say, well, that's your problem, right? They look at the IT partner or they look at their consultant and go, well, you'll get us there. You'll keep us safe. Many IT people have been labelled cowboys in the past, and fairly so. There's not been any central organisation body. There's no Master Builders Association or certified practicing IT person where you can lose your accreditation if you do the wrong thing. Frameworks are your tool for working with IT professionals to make sure that they're providing you with good practice and that they're aligning to a standard. You can ask them, which framework does that recommendation align with? And you can expect them to then present you with content that makes sense and is aligned or intelligible. It is actually a great tool in your tool belt to assess the quality and the work of IT professionals, to assess the quality of project designs and so on. We, for example, use the Essential 8 framework to inform our executive report that we create for board members. So if an organisation wants a board member report, it'll have content in there based on what needs to be the essential interest. You're seeing, well, objectively, these are important criteria. Are there other important things? Sure. But how do you choose which is most important? Rather than letting someone just come up with an idea, we align with an industry recommendation. This again is where InfoSec becomes important from a framework perspective. It gives the IT people on the design side or the implementation side great guidance. They don't need to make up or feel like they have to make up answers. They can work through really structured approaches, and we should be doing that. As IT professionals, it really is up to us to fit our own mask before trying to help others, to walk and breathe this stuff first. And it doesn't have to be complex. So, for example, the Essential 8 was written 6 or 7 years ago, quite recently, just here in Australia. It almost immediately received global recognition as a go-to framework. It received partnership and buy-in from Microsoft, and they immediately started releasing a lot of their controls aligned to the Essential 8 framework. So we can see that this simple eight long list is enough to get people going. Those 8 criteria have a measure against maturity levels, and they allow an organisation to grow in maturity over time, again, which is a really great alignment to the continuous improvement wedge of the circle. It's worth noting that those 8 criteria, FYI, were chosen based on if these 8 things had been all implemented in organisations that were breached at the time that the Essential 8 was written, 80% of those organisations would not have experienced that breach. So you can see that it's based in the real world. This is not bureaucratic, which was my thinking when I first started approaching this area. In the same way, so thinking about back now on what does this mean for your organisation? If your directors and your business leaders are not thinking about this, they need to go and evaluate what their requirements are. So they might want to look at what the AICD is saying. So for example, the AICD requires that IT people, directors have a good understanding and grasp on the risk management and the IT strategies in place for their organisation, and they will be held accountable if their organisation has a failing in that area. So your stakeholders at the senior level of the company have to become knowledgeable. And a part of the reason why is not just because they're going to get a slap on the wrist, but your customer stakeholders at the other end of the supply chain and your staff stakeholders who work in your organization are becoming more and more knowledgeable. These people care about their data, they understand the importance of their privacy, and they want to work with organizations that value that as well. And so a framework is a great way for you to put a badge on what you're doing to protect that data. If I'm a customer and I'm choosing a prospective company to engage with in some manner, to provide me with an education, to provide me with advice, to care for my data when I give it to them, or if I'm making that decision on behalf of someone I'm the guardian of, then I'm thinking about them as well. I want to know that that organization is going to care about my data, that they're going to value it. I want to know that they'll be around for long enough to keep providing me with the services that I want in the future. I don't want to have to choose now and then choose again later on because that company went out of business because of a data breach. Your staff want to know that their data is protected because they also want to have job security. They don't want to have to go and get a new job if an organization is about to go out of business because they're not caring about the consequences of not caring for that data. So security frameworks, although they grow up in the IT space and the data security space, they are also about business health. And IT really does sit at the center of these considerations. So for business leaders, for decision makers, we don't get to wash our hands anymore. We don't get to say, okay, well, I've assigned that risk to consultant X. I've outsourced that. It's not enough for you to say your IT partner or your web designer or your ISP is responsible. When you choose not to manage a control, which is fine. So let's go back to our online security training example. You may not develop security training, and nor should you if you're not in that particular sector. So you want to outsource the development of the answer to your question, which is good, but you still need to develop your own policy around what you expect. What do you think is good enough? What do you think your staff should be receiving? How often? What kind of training? On what topics? And so then you can hold that standard up to your supplier and say, I need from, we choose to use Bob's online security firm, and we require that they provide training 4 times a year, that they report on people who have failed the training, and that they follow up with people who haven't attempted the training at least once in a 12-month period. Your policy then is your responsibility, and the control is the part that you've delegated out to another organisation. And managing that tension is really important. A common one that we see in the right fit for risk space is ISM Control 1380, where privileged users are required to have separate user space and privileged admin space. And so people say, well, that's the IT partner's job, which is fine. But then they have someone in their organization who is an admin, and they don't think about, well, what does that mean for that internal team member? So they miss out on that little nuance of, well, we still have to have a policy around what we expect, or we just trust the IT people to do a good job, which I think is a diminishing thought. Nevertheless, we do bump into it. We want to see, as much as possible, all businesses in Australia come to understand what they can expect reasonably from an IT partner or from their IT security, and really have a fair and reasonable expectation that their data will be protected. They value their staff and their customer data, so they want to work with people who value the same. So how do we choose the right one? There is a couple of simple things that we can recommend. Check to see if there's any requirements in your sector or industry. For example, right fit for risk, the RFFR. framework. You may be required, in which case, swim in your lane. Do what others in your sector are doing. It's going to make it easier for you. There's going to be good support, good knowledge. The industry bodies are going to help provide you with advice as well. Identify who in your organisation will ultimately be responsible for this area. And then ask what capacity do they have to be learning new frameworks, and ensure that their position is one that's empowered to lead the organisation through change and growth. So you might nominate somebody who is skilled in this area but does not have much time. So they need to pick a framework that is approachable and one that they can make a good start in, or they may have already reached, say, maturity level 1 in Essential 8. You might be thinking, do we bring in SIS or do we bring in NIST? You could, but if they're a little bit time starved, why don't you go for maturity level 2 or 3 in the Essential 8, which is going to seriously improve your posture without having to learn a whole new language. What do your stakeholders want or value? Listen to your customers, listen to your staff around the things that are meaningful to them. If you deal in the EU, you're going to be dealing with the GDPR. If you're dealing with America, you're going to be hearing a lot about NIST or the California privacy principles, and you need to be speaking their language. There's no point in saying, well, we're in Australia, so we do whatever we want. Again, if you're dealing only in Australia, you need to be talking about the Essential 8. It is constantly broadcast via every stream of information to your customers. And if you don't have some kind of competency in that space, you may find yourself struggling to communicate the value that you place in this area. And then ask as well, do any partner organisations already have an alignment or a recommendation that you can join in with? So, for example, we use the Essential 8, we use SIS, Centre for Internet Security's version 8, we use ISO 27001. So if you're partnering with the IT department, you're going to get benefit in talking about those 3 frameworks, because we know those frameworks well, we're implementing them for ourselves and others already, and so you're going to get really good advice, good input in those areas. If you're working with you might have a parent company, and that parent company may operate out of the EU. And so GDPR might be a really approachable framework for your organisation, because you're going to get that benefit from what is happening already in your partner organisations. Okay. I have now talked as fast as I can to cover off as much of this as I can, that I think hopefully will be usable. I expect that some questions might have come up as we go along. Probably questions will come along as well in the future, and of course I'm available via email or Teams chat or whatever to field those. But I will open it up to the floor, or to you, Anna, whether any questions have come in that we can help answer.
Awesome. Thank you. That was really great. I do have a few questions here. So one is around the difference between the ISO 27001 2017 versus the current controls, and what that transition is meaning for our clients, or in our experience for people.
Cool. That's a really good question. So ISO 27001 is the data security international standard. 2013 was the original, or not the original version, it's the version most people are on. I think there was a version before that even, maybe 2008 or something. So if you see ISO 27001:2013, that's the version. So 2022 is the current version. It was released in 2022. If you are 27001 accredited, you will go through a full assessment every 3 years. So within 3 years of the 2022 release, you have to be on 2022. So you could stay on the 2013 version through 2023, 2024, but come 2025, you are expected to be on the 2022 version. The transition is not that painful, but it will take time. There are a number of online resources. Even your auditors would have resources for helping to map the controls from 2013 version to 2022. What it means is overall a significant simplification, a reduction from 120 controls to 96 or something like that. And the controls are now ordered in areas of business, so people and culture, technical controls, leadership. And so those that layout is much better than it used to be. So if you're looking at getting certified and you're not certified at all, do it on 2022. Do not start on 2013 now. 1, and 2, if you are on 2013, you really do need to be planning for your cutover, because you're going to bump into it next year if you haven't already.
Nice. Thank you. Another question we've got here is around DISP accreditation and what place that has. So it didn't come up in the many frameworks mentioned, but what's the purpose of DISP framework?
Sure. DISP is from the Department of Defence, and a bit like Right Fit for Risk is for dealing with the Australian government broadly. DISP is if you want to deal with defence. It takes the first 4 controls from the essential 8 and expects you to align to those. And they use some different language around the maturity levels. So, for example, they talk about whether a control is embedded rather than whether you adhere to that control. And that's a level of implementation that says it's in everything you do. You don't have a policy over here that staff sign once. It is in your processes, it is in your meetings, it is getting updated regularly, it's living and breathing a part of your business. So DISP is a really great accreditation to look at if you do have interests in the defence sector, or if that's something you want to be looking at in the future. I would encourage you to start early if you are looking at it, because the review process for DISP is quite slow. They do definitely have a queue or a backlog that they're working through, and so you want to jump on that nice and early. Anything else I want to say about DISP that would be helpful? Plus, I mean, there's certainly good opportunities within defence. So if it's a sector you hadn't considered, having a DISP accreditation can be a good differentiator for you as well.
Awesome. And I think we've got time maybe just for one more question. And Chris, I'm going to throw the mic over to you just around, can you help break down in a really simple way, I guess, the difference between Essential 8 level maturity 1, level 2 and level 3 for organisations who are going, those are great numbers, but what does that mean?
Yep. So in each control, there are, as Liam has already introduced, there are actually 8 different controls in there. So in each control, they will be separated into different levels. In each levels, there may be some, there will be policies that is required for the organization to be set up and configured, and also there will be controls. In each levels, like I said, well, like as it sees, it's a maturity level which will start it from something simple and basic control, which prevent user from having certain aspect of control over their devices or environment, and jump into the next maturity level. It may be something to do with the monitoring and the monitoring for the entire organizations, or something about the logging system that has to be monitoring the defects of some systems, and also vulnerability in the environment. And on the maturity level 3, it will be further strengthen the security, and then also implementing more controls to prevent any potential threats from coming through, and also to mitigate all possibility risk for the organization. Yep.
Thank you. And I think something that I often notice in the conversations I get to be privy to in this space is around the usability. It's a balance between being able to really use your IT and your systems and your complexity of your Essential 8 alignment. Would you say there's some trade-off there? The more mature your systems become, the more we have to modify how we're engaging with those systems, and therefore it's more of a cultural step in your experience?
I would say in terms of the cultural environment, it would just be, there are some controls that we can apply which prevent the users from the behavior, but there are also some aspect where it will be the organization needs to be set up with the policy, and then having interaction with the standard users, and kind of like guiding them to have more user awareness, in a sense, to protect the environment. So it's more of interactions between the customers and also from the BITD that we will have to implement a comprehensive system to protect the organizations.
Awesome. Do you want to jump in, Lee?
Yeah. I was going to say, there's always that age-old balance between usability and security. And as security goes up, usability goes down. That's just the way that spectrum works. And so you need to find, as an organization, where you want to sit on that scale. That might be driven by your own preferences, or that might be driven by your stakeholders. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we've hit 12:45 on the dot. So thank you, everyone. I hope your lunch was delicious. Thank you for joining us. We will send around the presentation and the video for your reference. And if any questions come up, we're always available to answer them. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll see you at the next Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much. Thanks,
everyone.
Liam.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.